So everyone, it's time to talk about one of the most special characters in all of Magia Record. It is indeed time to talk about Sakurako. So we have the Fate Weave for her now officially announced with all of the stuff in it, the event as well. That is going to run at the same time as the Ashley rerun gacha. But why would you want to roll for Ashley if you can roll for Sakurako instead? So we're going to have a look at just how good she actually is. And I mean, as I mentioned before, I've made a video about Ashley before, so you can watch that video as well and then decide for yourself what you want. That said, of course, Sakurako is indeed a lot more cute. One thing right off the bat is that we have to talk about how special it is that we have a character like this, because it is indeed a playable Uwasa. I know a lot of people wanted the anonymous AI to be playable at some point as well, in some degree, shape or form, but until that happens, maybe never, we will have to do with this, although there is kind of a lie on this image. It says at the bottom, Puella Magi. This is not a Puella Magi. What? Something's wrong there, but not that that actually matters, because we need to actually take a look at the discs and the type and the stats and everything like that. First, she is of course a light type with a 2 Excel discs and 2 blast discs, meaning that once again we're looking at a character who is supposed to be able to do some good damage with blasts, and while also being able to get to Magia and use Magia a bit. And we have to figure out what of these two things Sakurako does better and where you should play her as. Like, should you play her in a blast team or should you play her in a Magia team? Characters like these usually can go into kind of both, but we need to actually look at the rest of their skill set to see where they fit better. We see then also that she's balanced type. Balanced type basically means that she gets 10% less Magia from attacking and being attacked than like normal types, I guess. So it's a little bit sad on that front, but like I said, type mostly doesn't really matter. Moving on though, the more important part are the stats, and these stats are looking really, really good. So usually I like to take characters and compare them to Tart. I mean, I didn't really start comparing characters to Tart for any specific reason, but then I realized, wait a second, so many characters out there compare really well to Tart, because Tart is someone who is known for having really good stats. So if we take this as the baseline for someone who has good stats, and then we see someone who compares really well to this character, then we can say, oh, then this other character must also have really good stats. So we take a look at the HP. Tart is known for having not that much HP, but having pretty decently high attack and really high defense at the same time. So we can see that he has about 9,000 here, about 9,000 there, about 24,000 on the HP side. We compare that to Sakurako, who has 27,000 HP, which is quite a bit more, and she has similar attack and similar but slightly less defense. So for the most part, she has similar stats to Tart, but is a tiny bit more tanky. Having 100 defense less doesn't make that bit of a difference, but having about 3,000 more HP does make a difference. So she is on that front actually a little bit better than Tart. However, I also need to mention at this point that because of her disc set, she's not going to be able to do Puella Blast combos, which is quite a bit of a damage loss if you are running just Sakurako herself. By the way, I have been calling her Sakurako because that's basically how people usually call her, because it's quite a mouthful to say Room of the 10,000 Years Sakura. That's quite a long name, and even on the American server, she's now called Eternal Sakura. But even that is quite a mouthful to say, so people just say Sakurako, and that's a rather quick and easy way of calling her. Something else to note is that, of course, she does have a personal. We're going to quickly take a look at that, and we see that it gives a chance to critical hit 100%. And this is also where we're going to start to notice a bit of a theme, because Sakurako actually is one of the Memoria who, in my opinion, is rather well designed. And I don't mean just visually, I mean just gameplay-wise also well designed, in that she has a rather interesting theme, or not an interesting theme, but she actually has a theme around all of her skill set. And her skill set is basically, you figure out what your opponent does, and then you take advantage of that by doing stuff like hitting them critically. So her personal gives critical strike. For one turn for herself, 100% though, that's really good. This is one of those things that you can compare this to other effects. For example, this is a damage modifier similarly to damage up or blast up. So if you imagine it said something like blast up 100%, for just this turn, and you used a Puella Blast combo somehow on Sakurako with a connect maybe, that would be extremely good if you could have like 100% blaster. But for here, 100% critical hit, because it deals plus 100% damage, is really, really good. Also, something to note is that if somehow you were to hit the damage modifier cap, which is a total of 200%, so let's say you have 100% blast up and 100% damage increase, for example, you would be at 200%, which is the cap for damage modifiers, but you can still crit on top of that for another plus 100% for a total of 300%, so that's really, really good. In general, this is a really, really good personal. However, the thing about crit is that you kind of need to already have a lot of attack. Similarly with blast up, you need to already have a lot of attack up before blast up becomes really good. Similarly here, if you use this and you have no attack ups on your Sakurako, it's gonna deal almost no damage. You need attack ups first and then the crit on top of that. That is something you need to keep in mind. So she's one of the very few characters who actually has a pretty decent personal. Moving on from that, we take a look at the rest of her stuff. Her awakening bonuses are pretty standard across the entire board. She's a very well-balanced character. I mean, her type is balanced, so we would expect that. We have a spirit enhancement, and don't worry guys, I know every single character is going to get a spirit enhancement at some point, and I will review every single character again when they get a spirit enhancement, although characters that I've already reviewed will get like an abridged version where I just very quickly talk about their spirit enhancement stuff. And if you're worried about that making for really long and big videos, don't worry, timestamps will be used once that happens, and you can like look at the bottom and there's like this, the YouTube bar now has chapters. That's amazing. But yeah, she has a really good stuff here. We also see a defense pierce. Remember what I just said about her theme, about downloading her opponent basically and then striking weak points? Defense pierce in here. So so far, crit, defense pierce. What else do we have? More crit and evade. Her theme continues. So she is able, with her connect, to give someone 40% attack up and 70% crit. And remember what I just said about crit, that crit and similar damage modifiers only become really good once they have a high attack. That is exactly why usually if you have really good damage modifiers like crit, blast up, etc., you want to pair that with high attack, which is why connects like Nanakas and Tsurunos are really darn powerful, or Ashleys, because they give attack up and blast up. In here we have attack up and critical hit at the same time, which makes this a really, really good connect. It also gives 65% evade chance. However, I do need to mention at this point that you are talking about RNG here. 70% crit is really high, but it's still possible that you're not critting like 2 or maybe even 3 of your attacks, in which case the connect does basically nothing. I mean, I guess you can say, well, they can also get attacked back, and then maybe they can proc the evade, right? But once again, 65%, it's really high, but it's still possible that you get hit like 2 or 3 times, and then it's kind of sad. So while the connect most of the time will be really good, you will have the occasional instance where this connect just does nothing, and it's gonna suck really bad. But that chance is rather low. For the most part, this connect is really, really good. And one of the better connects for damage. It just relies a little bit on RNG. We then move on to her Magia, and remember what we said before with her having 2 Excel discs, is that she would potentially be able to work in an Excelius team. So if you had, for example, her together with Arena, for example, as a character, or Nemu, very fittingly. It's basically a mother at this point. So you have a lot of Excel discs in that team, and Sakurako would fit very well into that team. 2 Excel discs is basically like a ticket into that team. So you could play her in a Magia team. So what does her Magia do? And her Magia is pretty darn good. And I didn't bring this up yet. I'll bring this up in. Okay, talking about Homura, just very quickly, because I did very quickly make a mention of this when I talked about Mizugi Homura. First off, her stats. Sakurako's stats are way better. She has way more HP, way more defense, and even slightly more attack. So first off, Sakurako has way better stats than Swimsuit Homura with the same discs, but a worse type. So Balanced has way less Magia generation than Magia type. But very quickly looking down here, also attack up, also evade, but guaranteed. Click quick doesn't matter. So the connect is also rather similar, but Sakurako's most of the time, like 90% of the time, is better. And then we look at the Magia, and this is the very, very important bit, is that Sakurako also has a very similar Magia, and that she deals attribute strength and damage to one enemy, and she's light type, 580%. And then we have Swimsuit Homura, 600% attribute strength and damage to one enemy, and she's single target, and she's light type. So very similar sets from both of these characters, but Sakurako is better in almost every single aspect. The Magia for Sakurako is going to be better. Just very quickly, remember this one stuns the target for 1 turn, which in a lot of cases can actually be bad, and gives us self-endure for 3 turns, which is pretty good, but survive would have been way better. And then we look over, and once again we're looking at Sakurako. Damage slightly worse, but just very, very slightly. You barely will even notice it. And also to reiterate about what attribute strength and damage means is that when you attack a dark enemy with a light type, you of course get attribute bonus for hitting the element that you're strong against. And in that case, you would get like plus 50% bonus damage. In that case, whatever bonus damage you get gets doubled if it's attribute strengthened. And also, I need to mention this every single time this comes up because it's very, very important that everyone knows this, even if you've seen videos before and you know this. If an enemy is hit by a status ailment of at least level 2, like Bind, Burn, Curse, Bewitch, etc., etc. If you're not quite sure, look up those effects on the wiki, and it will tell you that you will deal that they will take bonus damage from the weak element. With that, they will take 80% bonus damage instead of 50%. And then on top of that, if it's still attribute strengthened, you double that again, and they will take plus 160% bonus damage. So if you use this on someone who's, for example, cursed, they will take a ridiculous amount of bonus damage if they are a dark type, and if they aren't a dark type, they just take normal damage. But oh my god, the amount of damage you can do with attribute strengthened Magia is actually ridiculous. Only downside is that it's single target. However, that could also be an upside if you're fighting against single target dark type enemies. So basically, this will delete every single tile dark type enemy, especially if they're hit with a status ailment that is at least of level 2, so it does increase damage taken from weak elements. So damn, that's good. But like I said, similarly with Homura, she also has that, right? So why do I say that her connect is way better? First off, it gives skill seal. Okay, who cares? That doesn't actually matter too much. I guess in some challenge quests where enemies use skills a lot, this can be really good. But more importantly, Excel gain up for all allies for 3 turns for 30% at Magia level 5. That's pretty good. So if you are using Magia, you're most likely using her on a Magia team. Most likely. So if you are using her on a Magia team, getting XLMP gain up 30% for everyone is really darn good, especially for 3 turns on all allies, meaning you can stack this if you get to use Magia multiple times. That's amazing. And also, once again, the theme of downloading the enemy and then basically striking weak points, chance to anti-evade 100% to herself for 3 turns. That said, this doesn't really come in that often, especially if you're using Magia. Magia bypasses evade. So if you're using this on someone who has evade up, the Magia will still hit them anyway, because like I said, Magia bypasses evade, and most of the time the enemy will just die from that. If the enemy survives that and has evade, then you can hit her with the anti-evade. It's not that good, but I guess there are some very few instances where there are challenge quests, especially EX challenge quests that come later from the Japanese server, where enemies actually give themselves 100% evade every turn, and they have like 50% status ailment resistance, so you can't status ailment on them that easily. And in those specific instances, this is a godsend to have. But overall, it's a bit weak of an effect. So this Magia, while the damage is really good, the Excel MP gain up is really good if you play it on a Magia team, has 2 effects that are highly situational for only a handful of quests, but at least in those quests can do some pretty good stuff. And if we compare that back to Akemi Homura, like I said, the stun, yeah, sometimes really good, sometimes not that good, and the endurance is alright. So I would say they're mostly the same, but I would still give the edge to Sakurako's Magia simply because of the ability to give her entire team Magia up, which is really, really good. So at this point, don't worry, if you've rolled for Akemi Homura and she's 4th slot, that's still really, really good. Having 4th slot on any character is extremely good. It's just that the developers kind of decided, I guess, you know the Swims with Homura character? What if we just make the same character again, slightly tweak it and make everything better? I'm a Homura fan, but that's a bit underhanded right there. Moving on to Magia 2, which is basically it's just a Doppel. they just called it Magia 2 because, like I said, she's not a Puella Magi. If she's not a Puella Magi, how is she gonna have a Doppel? No, she has a Magia 2 instead. It's just a different name. It just does way more damage. Oh my god. If anything survives this, like if any dark type who is cursed survives this, send me an email because I'm not gonna believe it. Actually, don't send me an email. I don't even have my email up here, but send me a comment below. Also, once again, does Skill Seal, does the exact same. It does like 5% more XLMP gain up. Whoop-de-doo, who cares? So at this point, it almost looks like if you're trying to play this for the XLMP gain up, just use 2 Magia instead. But on the other side, you now have anti-evade on all allies instead of just on self, which is pretty good as well. So if you're, I would still go to Magia too, but if you're purely trying to use her as an XLMP battery for some reason, you would use 2 Magia instead. But for pretty much any other case, the anti-evade on everyone is pretty alright. In the case where it actually is important, like on the challenge quest where you actually need this, is really good. And the XLP gain up, I mean, yeah, that's fine. The damage, however, absurd. So overall, we can look at all of this and say that I really like the way that Sakurako is basically being handled in the gameplay. Like I said, she has this theme of downloading the enemy and then striking weak points, stuff like that. There is some RNG going on with her Connect, but and her SE as well, but we're gonna get to that a little way later. But she does have potential to have ridiculous amounts of output to give to her friends. She has a Magia that can do ridiculous amounts of damage of output, but Sakurako is also the kind of character that you kind of need to play well. You need to play her as, maybe if you play her in a blast team, which you can because she has 2 blast lists, you play her in a blast team as a support that tries to enable other characters to critically hit and also gives them a big attack up. So maybe you also don't want to overcap other characters on attack up. You can use this to evade some damage if you play your cards well. You can play her in a Magia team where she not only can play as a battery with the XLMP gain up, but also nuke single targets. So she has very specific strengths, but she also has very specific weaknesses in that, for example, like I said, RNG here, some of those effects are rather situational. She's not a blast gorilla, so if you play in a blast team, she's not a blast gorilla. So other characters who also are very good at supporting in blast teams, like Nanaka or Ashley, but our blast gorillas themselves are probably better for blast teams. But she can do a lot of things really well, requires somewhat of a brainy playstyle to get the best out of her, but I do also need to mention that she needs to support other characters, which is also in the theme of her character, in that, I mean, like lore-wise, it's in the theme of her character, so I really like her, and it does make sense that she is rather popular among the people. Now, we do have a lot of other memoria we have like 2 other memoria to go about. There's not too much to say about these. First off, we have image tagging in the server. By the way, I need to mention this as well. I usually don't mention this because I forget about it. She's limited. She's only available right now. And all the memoria in here are also limited, these 2. So that's a thing to worry about. This one gives attack up for 1 turn and crit 35% chance. It's decent. If you had this MLB, it would be really good, but you probably won't have this MLB. That's a problem. Overall, if you somehow get this, or maybe multiple of them, and you have, once again, no other good memoria, and you really need an attack up active, this one is really, really good. As far as attack up active memoria goes, this one is really, really good, but because it's limited, you're probably not going to get this to MLB, and you're probably not going to have a lot of these. You also have Relaxing in the Park, which gives XLMP gain up, but very little. Like, this is, you can get way more than this. However, you can have these lying around as a tech choice, because even not MLB, it gives anti-darkness 100%, which is really good if you are faced in a quest, of course, where enemies have darkness a lot. So yeah, maybe you want to have 1 or 2 of these lying around if you do roll the gacha and you find these, because usually when I roll the gacha, I just afterwards chuck every single 3-star memoria away for the most part. Sometimes I regret it, to be honest, but this is one of those that you would probably not want to chuck away and actually keep around, maybe like 2 or 3 copies of, so you have the anti-darkness option. Put them in stash or whatever. So yeah, overall, I actually really like this design-wise, and pretty interesting character, but damn, we need to write to support that it shouldn't say Puella Magia down there, because she's not. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Hit that subscribe button. See you guys next time.